What if I told you that unicorns, dragons, and sea monsters aren't just characters in a fairy tale book, but were actually walking, swimming, and breathing companions to our ancestors? For centuries, we've dismissed legends of giants and monsters as the product of overactive imaginations or campfire ghost stories. But modern science is beginning to pull back the curtain on a reality that is far more shocking. We are finding the bones, the DNA, and the geological evidence that prove our ancestors weren't lying. They were simply reporting what they saw. Today, we are exploring 5 mythical creatures that actually existed in the world. These aren't just lookalikes. These are the biological origins of our most famous myths. We are starting with a creature that roamed the icy plains and gave birth to the legend of the most graceful animal in folklore. First on our list is the Siberian unicorn, scientifically known as Elasmotherium sibericum. When you think of a unicorn, you probably imagine a slender, white horse with a spiral horn and a magical aura. The reality was much more intimidating. Elasmotherium was a massive prehistoric rhinoceros that lived across Eurasia. It was the size of a woolly mammoth, weighed up to 4 tons, and possessed a single humongous horn on its forehead that could reach lengths of over 2 meters. For a long time, scientists thought this beast vanished 200,000 years ago, long before humans could have developed complex myths. However, recent radiocarbon dating has dropped a bombshell. These real-life unicorns were still roaming the Earth as recently as 39,000 years ago. This means they lived right alongside early modern humans and Neanderthals. Imagine being an early human hiker in the snowy grasslands of Siberia and seeing a 4-ton armored beast with a lance on its head charging through the fog. That memory didn't just fade away, it was passed down through generations, slowly morphing from a terrifying giant rhino into the elegant unicorn we know today. The power and majesty of the creature remained, but the rough edges were smoothed out by thousands of years of storytelling. Next, let's talk about the creature that has haunted the maps of sailors for millennia, the Kraken. For hundreds of years, sailors told terrifying stories of a sea monster with tentacles so large it could wrap around an entire galleon and drag it into the abyss. We used to laugh at these stories, thinking sailors were just seeing giant logs or hallucinating from too much rum. But then, we found the giant squid, or Architeuthis ducks. These animals can grow up to 13 meters long, with eyes the size of basketballs and tentacles lined with sharp, serrated suckers. But wait, it gets even more intense. There is also the colossal squid, which is even heavier and has rotating hooks on its tentacles. When a giant squid surfaces near a small wooden boat from the 16th century, it would look exactly like a monster from another world. We now know that these creatures engage in epic battles with sperm whales in the deep ocean, leaving massive circular scars on the whale's skin. The Kraken wasn't a myth, it was just a shy, deep-sea predator that occasionally made a terrifying appearance at the surface. The sailors weren't crazy. They were lucky to have survived an encounter with one of the most mysterious predators on the planet. Moving from the ocean to the islands of Indonesia, we find the real-life inspiration for dragons. For thousands of years, cultures across the globe have told stories of giant, scaled reptiles that could destroy villages. While we don't have fire-breathing lizards, we do have the Komodo dragon. But the twist is that the Komodo dragons we see today are actually the smaller cousins of a much more terrifying ancestor called Megalania. Living in Australia until about 50,000 years ago, Megalania was a monitor lizard that grew up to 7 meters long and weighed nearly 2 tons. It was the largest terrestrial lizard to ever live. It had serrated teeth and used a venomous bite to take down giant marsupials. Early Aboriginal humans arrived in Australia around 65,000 years ago, meaning they spent 15,000 years sharing the bush with a lizard the size of a city bus. The stories of giant man-eating reptiles weren't fantasies. They were survival warnings passed down from people who actually had to dodge these monsters in the tall grass. When you look into the eye of a modern Komodo dragon, you are looking at the last surviving ember of a dragon lineage that once ruled a continent. Now, let's travel to the tiny island of Flores, where we find the origin of the hobbit, or the forest gnome. In local folklore, there are stories of the Ibu Gogo, small, hairy, forest-dwelling people who walked with a slight waddle and had their own primitive language. Scientists discovered the remains of Homo floresiensis in 2003, a species of ancient human that stood only about 1 meter tall. These diminutive humans lived on the island until about 50,000 years ago, and some evidence suggests they might have survived even longer. They hunted pygmy elephants and fought off giant storks. The most incredible part is that the local legends about small people living in caves are incredibly specific and match the physical descriptions of these ancient humans. This isn't just a coincidence. It is an example of collective memory lasting for tens of thousands of years. The mythical small people of the woods weren't a separate magical race. They were another branch of the human family tree that lived in isolation until the world changed around them. Finally, we have to talk about the roc, the legendary giant bird of prey from Middle Eastern mythology, said to be so large it could carry away an elephant in its talons. While carrying an elephant might be an exaggeration, the bird that inspired this legend was very real and very frightening. Meet Apiornis, the elephant bird of Madagascar. It was the heaviest bird to ever live, standing 3 meters tall and weighing half a ton. Its eggs were so large they could hold the volume of 150 chicken eggs. While the elephant bird couldn't fly, it existed alongside humans for centuries. However, the true source of the flying monster myth likely comes from Haast's eagle in New Zealand. This eagle had a 3-meter wingspan and specialized in hunting the moa, a bird larger than a human. Haast's eagle would dive at speeds of 80 kilometers per hour and use its massive talons to crush the skull of its prey. To the Maori people who first arrived in New Zealand, this eagle was the puakai, a monster from the sky that could and would target humans. When travelers heard these stories and saw the massive eggs of the elephant bird, the legend of the roc was born, a hybrid of real avian giants that once patrolled the ancient skies and islands. The common thread between all these stories is that our ancestors were incredible observers of the natural world. They didn't have cameras or textbooks, so they used stories to preserve the memory of the extraordinary things they encountered. When a species goes extinct, it doesn't disappear from the human mind immediately. It lingers in songs, in art, and in the terrifying tales told to children to keep them away from the deep woods or the dark water. The Siberian unicorn reminds us that the line between a rhinoceros and a magical horse is just a matter of perspective and time. The kraken shows us that the deep ocean still holds monsters that would make a medieval sailor tremble. Megalania proves that dragons were once a very real threat on the Australian plains. We often think of ourselves as separate from the prehistoric world, but the existence of these creatures proves that we are actually the tail end of a very wild and monstrous era. We walked with giants, we fought dragons, and we shared our islands with different species of humans. The world of myth is just the world of prehistory seen through the lens of human emotion and cultural memory. Every time an archaeologist digs up a new bone, they are often just confirming a legend that a local tribe has been telling for better part of 10,000 years. The Siberian unicorn, or Elasmotherium, is a perfect example of how science catches up to myth. For years, the idea of a unicorn was seen as purely decorative, a symbol of purity. But the physical reality of a massive, one-horned beast charging across the steppe is much more grounded. It was a creature of power and survival. The fact that it survived the Ice Age alongside us means that the first humans to ever create art probably saw this animal in the flesh. When we see cave paintings of a large beast with a single horn, we aren't seeing a dream. We are seeing a documentary of a world that was much more dangerous than the one we live in today. The giant squid and the kraken story also highlight the limits of human exploration. We only captured the first footage of a live giant squid in its natural habitat in 2004. Think about that. We had mapped the surface of the moon before we had a good video of a creature that had been terrifying sailors for 1,000 years. It makes you wonder what else is down there that we still consider a myth. Is the Loch Ness Monster just a misunderstood species of giant eel? Is the sea serpent just an oarfish seen in a specific light? The kraken went from a monster to a biological fact, and many other mythical sea creatures may soon follow the same path. The Megalania and the dragons of the southern hemisphere tell us a story about human migration and the impact of our arrival. When humans entered New Zealand or Australia, they found ecosystems that were dominated by giant reptiles and birds. The legends of these monsters often coincide with their disappearance. Our stories are the only records left of these apex predators. They were the original kings of the wild, and our myths are the headstones on their evolutionary graves. A dragon is simply a lizard that was too big for us to ignore. As for the little people of Flores, the discovery of Homo floresiensis changed everything we thought we knew about human evolution. It showed that the world was once a much more diverse place for the human genus. We weren't always the only ones. The fact that folk stories about the Ibu-Gogo describe them as having a low forehead and a lack of complex tools, which matches the skeletal evidence, is a chilling reminder of how long a memory can last. It suggests that oral traditions can survive for 50,000 years, carrying a kernel of truth through the rise and fall of civilizations. The giant birds like the Haast's eagle and the elephant bird show us that the sky used to be a much more predatory place. Today we look at an eagle and see a majestic bird. 1,000 years ago, an inhabitant of New Zealand would have looked at the sky with genuine fear. The rock wasn't a symbol of the sun or a messenger of the gods. It was a predator that could strike from above without warning. Our myths have taken these terrifying biological realities and turned them into something more manageable, something we can talk about without shaking. The study of extinct animals is not just about the past, it's about understanding the roots of our own culture. We are a species of storytellers, and our best stories are the ones that are true. Whether it's the giant rhino of the north or the giant lizard of the south, these creatures shaped our psychology. They taught us to be brave, they taught us to be cautious, and they taught us to respect the hidden powers of nature. They remind us that the world is a vast, mysterious place, and that the things we think are impossible today might just be waiting to be dug up tomorrow. Next time you see a picture of a unicorn or a dragon, don't just think of it as a fantasy. Think of the shaggy, 4-ton rhino in the snow. Think of the 7-meter lizard in the red dust of Australia. Think of the people who sat around a fire, thousands of years ago, trying to describe the incredible things they had seen during the day. Their myths are our heritage, a bridge to a time when the world was full of monsters, and humans were just starting to find their way. The creatures of myth really did exist. They just had different names in the language of biology. One of the most fascinating aspects of these real-life myths is the psychological impact they had on early human societies. Imagine a tribe that has just lost a member to a megalania. To process that trauma, the creature becomes more than just a lizard. It becomes a spirit of the earth, a dragon that must be appeased or defeated. The biology of the animal informs the theology of the culture. Our religions and our legends are deeply rooted in the megafauna that we once lived with. When those animals went extinct, the gods they represented remained in our stories, becoming more and more abstract as the physical evidence of their existence faded into the earth. The Siberian unicorn also teaches us about the fragility of life. This massive beast survived for millions of years, through multiple ice ages, only to succumb to a changing climate and the pressures of a new, two-legged neighbor. The disappearance of these real-life mythical creatures marks the end of an era of giants. We are the survivors of that era, and our myths are a form of mourning for the wild, untamed world we used to inhabit. They are echoes of a time when the boundaries between the human world and the monster world were very thin. The kraken, too, represents the unknown frontier. The ocean is the last place on Earth where a true monster could still be hiding. Every year, we find new species in the deep that look like they were designed by an alien. The fact that the kraken as a giant squid turned out to be true gives hope to cryptozoologists everywhere. It proves that the human eye is a reliable witness, even when it's viewing something that seems impossible. If the kraken is real, why not the others? The ocean keeps its secrets well, but it occasionally throws us a bone or a tentacle to remind us who really owns the planet. For the people of Flores, meeting Homo floresiensis must have been like looking into a distorted mirror. They were both human, but so different. The legends of the Ibugogo are often stories of theft and cleverness, portraying the small people as forest tricksters. This suggests a complex relationship of competition and coexistence. The myth isn't just about a monster. It's about a neighbor. This is a much more nuanced view of the past than the one we usually find in history books. It turns the myth into a social history of our species. The Haast's eagle, or the puakai, is a reminder of how quickly an ecosystem can collapse. When the moa was hunted to extinction by the first humans in New Zealand, the eagle lost its only food source and vanished shortly after. The myth of the giant bird carrying away humans likely reflects the bird's desperate attempts to find new prey as its natural world crumbled. The horror of the myth is the horror of an ecological disaster. It's a story about the consequences of our own actions, told through the image of a feathered monster from the sky. Looking at these 5 creatures, we see that the word mythical is often just a placeholder for not yet rediscovered. We used to think the gorilla was a myth, a legend of a hairy man-beast told by African tribes, until Western scientists finally saw one in the 19th century. We used to think the giant panda was a myth. The list goes on. The Earth is much older and much weirder than we like to admit, and our myths are the breadcrumbs leading us back to the truth. The Siberian unicorn, the kraken, the Komodo dragon's ancestor, the Hobbit of Flores, and the Rock are all testament to the fact that we live in a world of wonders. Our ancestors weren't making things up to be entertaining. They were struggling to find words for the sheer scale and strangeness of the life around them. They lived in an age of giants, and they were giants of storytelling themselves. By finding the reality behind the myth, we don't lose the magic. We gain a deeper appreciation for the true history of our planet. The Megalania's serrated teeth and venomous bite are more terrifying than any fictional fire breath. The 4-ton weight of the Elasmotherium is more impressive than any magical horse. The reality of these animals is far more interesting than the fantasy. They were real biological machines, perfected by evolution to dominate their environments. When we strip away the legends, we find a world that was brutal, beautiful, and absolutely real. This journey through history reminds us that we should listen more closely to the oral traditions of indigenous cultures. These stories aren't just entertainment, they are data. They are observations of the natural world that have been verified by thousands of years of human experience. When a legend talks about a giant beast or a hidden cave of small people, we should be looking for the bones, not dismissing the story. The truth is often hiding in plain sight, disguised as a fairy tale. The extinction of these creatures was a great loss to the world's biodiversity, but they live on in our minds. As long as we tell stories of unicorns and dragons, a part of the Elasmotherium and the Megalania remains alive. We are the keepers of their memory, the narrators of their legacy. We carry their spirits in our folklore, ensuring that even though they are gone from the physical world, they will never be forgotten. What will the humans of the future think of our myths? In 10,000 years, will they look at stories of elephants and polar bears and think they were mythical creatures? Will they find the bones and realize that the legends of the giant white bear and the beast with the trunk were true? It's a sobering thought. We are living among the mythical creatures of the future. The animals we see every day might one day be the stuff of legends, their reality questioned by a generation that has never seen them. But for now, we have the fossil record and the ancient stories to guide us. We can stand in a museum and look at the skull of a Siberian unicorn and feel the connection to the person who first painted its likeness in a dark cave. We can look at the vast expanse of the ocean and know that the Kraken is not a ghost, but a neighbor in the abyss. We are not alone in our history. We have always been surrounded by incredible beings that challenge our understanding of what is possible. Whether it's a giant eagle in the sky or a tiny human in a cave, the diversity of life on Earth is the greatest story ever told. The 5 mythical creatures we explored today are just a few chapters in that epic tale. They prove that our world is a place of endless discovery, where the line between fact and fiction is constantly shifting. Stay curious, keep looking at the bones, and never stop listening to the stories. The next monster we find might be the most legendary one of all. As we close this chapter, remember that the monsters of the past weren't defeated by heroes with swords. They were defeated by a changing world. They left us their stories as a gift, a way to remember that the world was once much larger and more mysterious than we can imagine. The unicorn, the kraken, the dragon, the gnome, and the giant bird. They were here. They were real. And in a way, through our stories and our science, they still are. The story of the Elasmotherium, or the Siberian unicorn, is especially poignant because it shows how closely we were tied to the megafauna. Our survival depended on understanding these giants. We weren't just onlookers, we were active participants in the prehistoric drama. Our myths are the script of that drama, recorded on the walls of caves and in the verses of ancient poems. They are the autobiography of the human race. The colossal squid lurking in the Antarctic depths is a reminder that the age of monsters hasn't entirely ended. It has just moved to places where we can't easily go. The ocean remains a reservoir of prehistoric power, a place where the rules of the surface don't apply. The kraken is our modern link to that ancient, watery darkness. The Megalania reminds us that our fear of the reptilian is not an irrational phobia, but a deeply embedded survival instinct. We are hardwired to look for the dragon in the grass because for thousands of years, the dragon was really there. Our evolution was shaped by the need to outsmart these cold-blooded giants. Our intelligence is, in part, a response to their power. The Homo floresiensis discovery is a lesson in humility. It shows that being human has meant many different things over the history of our genus. We are the last ones standing, but we weren't always the only ones. The gnomes of our myths are a ghostly reminder of the relatives we lost along the way, and the Haast's eagle is a warning about our power as a species. We can end the reign of a giant bird simply by changing its environment. We are the most dangerous creature to ever walk the earth. the only one capable of turning a physical reality into a myth in just a few centuries. Our stories are a way for us to remember what we have done and what we have lost. Keep exploring the boundaries of history. The earth is still full of bones, and the sky is still full of stars. And the stories we tell are the threads that hold it all together. The mythical creatures that really existed are a testament to the fact that we live in a reality that is far more magical than any fiction. The unicorns, dragons, and monsters were here, and through our curiosity, they will always be part of our world. Turning myth into history is not about losing wonder. It's about finding truth. And the truth is that we are part of an incredible, monstrous, and absolutely real adventure. Keep your eyes open, because the next myth to become real might be right under your feet.